Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. I'm sure all of you have heard that black and white photography is making a huge comeback. And I'm sure also that you are all trying to get your editing skills to another level. But for those who are still struggling, well, today you're in luck, because I'm about to share with you my editing techniques that will take your editing skills to a whole new level. So stick with me to the end of the video, and believe me, you won't be disappointed with the results. This is the image we'll be editing. I showed it to you in the introduction, and I'll be using Adobe Camera Raw to edit this image. I'm going to start off by changing the profile to Adobe Landscape. We've increased the colors by changing it to Adobe Landscape and saturation. And the next thing I'm going to do is reduce the highlights, and you get these amazing details in the clouds. Increase a touch of shadows. Increase the whites until clippings appear and then disappear by decreasing the slider. Same for the blacks. A bit of contrast, and I'm going to reduce a bit of exposure. As I mentioned in my other videos, before turning to black and white, I always increase the colors, the vibrance and saturation, and by doing that you will get more detail and information in all the colors once we turn it to black and white. I'm going to go down to the calibration tool, and from here I'm going to increase the blue primary saturation to increase the colors all the way up. Next I'm going to go down to the color tab, and I'm going to decrease a bit of the temperature and give it a bluish look. These I don't touch them since I've used the calibration tool. You don't need to. And from here I'm going to go to the effects panel, increase some texture, a bit of clarity, and a bit of dehaze. We have some clippings here, shadow clipping warning, and I'm going to go back and see if I can remove the clippings. And that should be okay. The image is way too much colored, vibrant. Don't worry, that's how I want it before turning it to black and white, like I just said. From here I'm going to go down to the detail panel, increase the sharpening to around 50. I always reduce the radius and increase the detail to around there. Hold down the masking key, slider and increase the parts where you want sharpened, which will be the white parts. And from here I think we're ready to turn it to black and white. And I'll be doing that in Photoshop. And here we are in Photoshop. And now I'm going to show you why I told you to increase the saturation and the vibrance. Go down to the half circle of black and white here, which is the adjustment layer, and click on black and white. And here, like I mentioned, you get more information if you increase all the colors. and you can play around with these sliders individually. You see what I mean? When you increase the colors, you can play with these sliders to your liking. But I think I'm going to leave it how they are. I'm going to close this panel, go back down to the adjustments layer, and to get it into a much better black and white, click on the gradient map. Click on this drop down window where it says smooth and click on classic. And there you have a natural black and white image. It's not as flat as it was before the gradient. And I'll show you the difference by turning on and off these eyeballs. I'm going to turn off the gradient map, and that's with the gradient map. You get a much better black and white image by using the gradient map. From here I'm going to flatten the image, and I'm going to take it back to Adobe Camera Raw. Camera Raw filter, or take it back to Lightroom if you're using Lightroom. Reduce the image size a bit. And here I'm going to play around with the exposure panel once again. I need some more details here in these darker parts, so I'm going to increase the shadows. And that should be okay to around there. I'm going to reduce the highlights and watch how much more detail you get in the sky. And I'll keep it to around there. I'll try the whites until I see clippings again, and the blacks until I see clippings again. I'm going to decrease a bit of exposure. And that's enough with the exposure panel. You can keep going how you like. It depends on the image you're editing. And here I'm going to turn it into a much better image by using masking. We're going to click on the masking tools here, and I'm going to start off with a linear gradient. My method is all the same for each image. Just the variation of the sliders are different depending on your image. And here I'm going to decrease the exposure to around there. I'm going to use another linear gradient just above the top part of the sky, and reduce the exposure again. To around there. I'm going to use another linear gradient. I'm going to place it over the foreground. My aim is to get the viewer's eye to the main part of the image, which is the waterfalls here. And by doing that, I'll be increasing the middle part of the image. I'm going to reduce the exposure to around there. And next, I'll be using a radial gradient. And I'm going to start by placing radial gradients over the brighter parts of the image, which is here, 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 and up here. And by that we'll be doing dodging and burning. But we'll be using the radial gradient instead of the brush. So the first radial gradient I'm going to do is over here. I'm going to turn it. I'm going to try and hurry up. And I'm going to increase the exposure to around there. I'm going to use another radial gradient and place it over this part. And like this, we'll be creating different tones and contrast in the all of the image. We have bright, and dark. And like this, we'll be creating a 3D effect. I'm going to place another one here over this part. Open it up, increase exposure to about there. Another radial gradient over this part, increase exposure. Another radial gradient for this part here. And this is how they used to do it when they were using the darkroom. But here we're using Lightroom instead of the darkroom. And we're just doing the same thing, just like Ansel Adams used to do with his black and white images. Over here, another one, over here, and I'm sure you get the picture of what I'm doing. I'm going to place one here, move it down a bit, close it, increase exposure. And I keep doing this until I see it's enough. Go easy with the sliders, just subtle movements. I'm going to place one over here. But here I'll be increasing the shadows instead of the exposure. And that should be okay. Open it up a bit more. And that's great. Next, I'm going to start by doing a radial gradient over the water here. And you will be seeing the amazing difference in the before and after. I'm going to place another one here. Open it up a bit more. Should be okay. I'm placing them to get more details and get that 3D effect. Increase the exposure. Now I'm going to do some burning. And I'm going to use the radial gradient again. Over here. And here we decrease the exposure. I think I'm going to do another linear gradient for the foreground. Not too much. If you hold down the up arrow on the keyboard, you get a straight line. And I'm going to decrease the exposure here. And I think I'm going to do another one for the top part of the sky. Just around there. Now I'm going to do another radial gradient. I think it's going to be the last one of dodging and burning around there. And I'm going to increase it. Next, I want to get more detail in the flowing water here. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to use the luminance range. And you get an eyedropper, and what I'm going to do, I'm just going to place it over the white part of the water. Don't worry about here. I'm going to use a subtract brush to remove the rest of the mask on the image, because I only want the water. Increase the brush and start removing where you don't want the mask. I just want it over the water. You can use a different way to do it, but I found this way is very, very easy. Over there, a bit on these rocks here. And now I'm going to increase the exposure. Not too much. I'm going to increase a bit of whites. I'm going to increase a bit of texture. To around there. I'm going to decrease a bit of clarity. Next, I'm going to do another radial gradient, and I'm going to place it over the middle part of the image. Somewhere here on the brighter part. I'm going to increase just a bit of exposure, not too much. Open it up a bit more. I'm going to decrease it. To around there. And I'm going to decrease the highlights because we have clippings. And that should be okay. Now I'm going to use one last radial gradient, and here I'll be doing a vignette. I'll soon show you the before and after, and you'll see the amazing difference you get from your image by using lots of masking. Some people say it's too much, but don't worry. Everyone has their own opinion. This is how they used to do it in the older days, in the darkroom, like I said. And don't forget to invert the mask to create a vignette. And here I'm going to reduce the exposure. And there we have it. Go out of the masking, and I'm going to show you the before and after by pressing the P on the keyboard for preview, and that's the before, and that's the after. Before, once more time, and the after. And you can see the amazing difference from turning your color images to black and white. Like I said, black and white is making a great comeback. I know many people, they've stopped using color and they've turned to black and white, which is much more interesting. Well, thank you guys. Hope you hit the subscribe button, check out my other videos, and give a thumbs up. Thank you and see you later.